Okay, so let's get started. So I just pasted in a question and some, test cases. One test case on line 6 there. So why don't you just give that a read through and then we can get started.
Okay, so having read this through, this seems pretty. Obviously, like you're supposed to parse a string. We want to be able to do it as generally as possible, or like with time complexity, be done in O of n, since you should just be able to run through the string one time. So what do you want the function to be called, or does it not matter?
Whatever you want. Yeah.
Um, Okay, so I guess I'm going to start by iterating through the string. And kind of the way I'm thinking about this is that since you had mentioned previously that it should be like if you have RL, that's two different ones, not a single one, because it has to be all L's and all R's have to be grouped together. And so
Yep.
basically, I'm thinking that as I go from left to right, if I hit an R, it's kind of like start one, and then the next time if I hit an L and then an R after that, like is the current like that's when the string ends, and is it balanced? So like I'm gonna
Okay.
go to, say that again.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Okay, yeah. So I'm gonna go left for left from left to right, like hit an R, hit an L, hit another R. Now that's when the string ends, and I want to look back. Do I have an equal number of R's and L's there? Um, so let's start. So I want some sort of way to keep track of whether I'm like in a string or not, and a way to keep track of the number of R's and L's. So I'm going to say num R equals 0, num L equals 0, and then, or no, I probably just want to, like build up the current string, I think. So, um, well, no, I think I'm going to do it that way. So I'm going to say current string. So as I iterate through, I want to, so I'm going to say current string plus equals s. That way we're adding it to the current one. Or wait, sorry, we should do some checks first. So I want to say, are there going to be cases where the L is before the R, or should I always assume that the R is to the left of the L?
Let's assume for now that the R is always going to be in the left. So the first character will always be an R. Let's assume that for now.
Okay. All right, I'm trying to think how I want to, because I got to figure out some way. Like I don't want to just say if I hit an R, then this is the beginning or the end of a string, because you could have several R's in a row, and so I need a flag that's like, have I hit an L yet? So that I know next time I hit an R, that's like the kind of cut off of the old string, start of the new string.
Yeah, and actually, just off your old question, it does say that it is a balanced string. So yes, an R has to be on the left here.
Okay.
So.
All right. So I'm just gonna start throwing variables out here, and some of them I get rid of. So we're gonna say, in string equals false. That might be not the best way to do that, but so basically, if we hit if s equals L, then in string is not the best name for this, but basically, if I hit an L, then I know that this is true, and so the next time I hit an R, I can basically like keep the current string.
Okay, I see what you're doing. Yeah.
I don't know what the name for that should be, but
That's fine. Yeah.
And so here. going to take this list to keep track of all the balanced strings I have. So basically, this is if we hit an R and we were in the string and the number of R's and L's is equal, then append the current string and reset it. Oops. And reset the counters too. Okay, so now I want to say if well, here actually, I'm gonna throw this down into a separate one because I still want to reset even if they're not equal. I still want to reset. I just only want to append if they're equal.
Right.
Okay, so if S equals R and not in string, then well, okay, I think so. I have to. I think now. So I've done there's like the two main checks I think are if we've hit an L before, or if we've hit an L and if we're hit an R and we've hit an L before, and so after that, other than that, I think it's mostly just. I think before I kind of fully think through this, I need to. I need to add up my counters and everything, and so I'm gonna do a quick and dirty. I'll combine all this at the end, and so we have like a cleaner version. But oops. Okay, so so I actually want to do this. So right now I have like two kind of separate parts that I think I need to combine. So I have like we're checking as we talked about before, and then this is just the basic like if I'm at an L, if I'm at an R, add one to the appropriate counter and append the string. Okay. But so I want to do this. This can be done in here. And this. I think I'm actually going to do this in here, and then I'm going to take this out and put it down here. Because that's actually, I really just want to know if I'm like hitting an L or an R first.
Okay.
And this can go, actually, ooh, okay, wait, hold on. I don't want to have like 1,000 if statements, but for now I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
We can clean that up in a bit. So if it's an L, I want to add one to the counter, and then we know that we can't hit an L without having already hit an R, so this can be set to true. We also need to reset in string. There we go. That was. And so if we hit an L, then I want to, no matter what, I want to append the current string. If we hit an R, well, so no matter what, I want to append the current letter to the string that we're keeping track of right now. If it's an R, if it's like the first R of a new one, that's what we want to reset everything first. And then append the R. That's kind of my thought process here. So basically, add one. Actually, I want to add one to the counter afterwards on this one. So first check, is this the first R of a new bound string? If so, check to see if this current one is balanced and reset everything. And then after that, we can add one to the R and add the current letter to the current string. And then want to return balanced. So why don't I, if I type something down, if I type get balanced with the string.
Oh no, we can't run it. I'm just gonna follow your logic here.
Okay.
So just a note too, this actually, we just want to return an integer here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah, that's fine. Okay. So, I mean, I'm following your logic and it makes sense, but there's a lot of like these variables going on. A lot of the ifs are nested and everything.
Right.
So it gets a little spaghetti.
Right.
But
So
I mean, the logic is good. Yeah. So can you think of, instead of building strings up every time, what would, think of a, because again, I'm going to assume this works. And actually, before we get going on a little more better way, what would be the time and space? I think you mentioned at the beginning.
So the time complexity is just O of n, because you're iterating through the string one time. The space complexity, I gotta be honest, I don't understand space complexity as much as I should.
Sure.
But would you quickly remind me what space complexity deals with?
Yeah, so it's the same idea where you have like a big O notation for it. And it's basically how much extra space on order n are you adding in order to get to your solution. So like in your case, you're adding this array here.
Okay, so would this be, so like I think my understanding of space complexity has been like in a sorting, like if you do a merge sort or whatever, then you're like splitting apart the things, and maybe that's not merge sort, but it's like one of the ones where you're like splitting apart things, so you need to create new arrays where it's like half of the previous array.
Yeah.
Is that kind of where so it's like you have to create? Okay. So
it's like intermittent space you have to add to get to a solution.
Right. So then I think
or intermediate, sorry.
Would also be O of n, technically be O of like 2n, but since it's still in the same order of magnitude, it would be O of n, because you're just creating, basically you're not creating any more. If you're to concatenate all of balance, like if well, the worst case is that the balanced string is fully balanced and so there's no like sections that you're getting rid of, then you just have the string again, basically.
Yeah. But because we just want to count, I think you can knock out the list altogether for this, because you're returning the length of it here. But I think if you just like added one to a counter on line 25, I think it would, So right. It's not a big deal there.
Right.
Okay. So now let's start thinking about a new way to go about this. So kind of at like a high level, just looking at the input that we have, knowing that all we need to do is increment some counter.
Right.
How can I phrase this without giving too much? So just looking at this, when do we say like, yes, balanced string, sorry.
When we have already hit an L and we hit another R.
Right. So then if you see what about for this here?
So one of the things that I know that could instead of having like a number of R's and a number of L's, is basically just have like a counter that like goes up when you hit an R and go down when you hit an L. Is that kind of what you're trying to get at?
Yeah, that would work. It might save some of our nested ifs we got going on.
Right. So I think that, well, let me start with that. I'll just say counter. And then
make sure you update 13 to be like integer. So that way we're just incrementing it rather than making a new list.
Yeah, I'm gonna start with the counter so I don't get.
Okay, yeah, let's start with that. Sure.
So I'm gonna say if I hit an L, I'm gonna say the counter goes down. If I hit an R, the counter goes up. And so if I hit um, if I hit an R and I'm in the in the string or whatever that right name for that variable should be, and the counter is 0, then let's do balance counter here. Well, here, let me not deal with the if statements first. Let's just say counter. We'll come back to the if statements, fixing those. Okay, so I'm gonna get rid of that. Okay, so now if we hit an L, we go down 1. If we hit an R, we go up 1. If the counter is 0 when we hit an R and we're in a string, then that means we got to the end and it's balanced, and so we add 1 to the balance counter and reset everything. So now I want to try to get rid of, I can get rid of this. I want to try to get rid of these if statements that are so nested and gross.
Sure. So do we even need the Boolean?
Oh, so if we if we hit it with basically if we hit an R and the string is not equal to, or the counter is not equal to 0, then it wasn't balanced and we're at the end of a string. If we hit an R and the string and the counter is 0, then it's balanced and we hit the end of a string, except for when balanced counter is also 0, because, well, basically, like the thing that I'm worried about is like the beginning. Like if the first R that you hit, the counter is going to be 0, but you're not going to be at the end of a string. Does that make sense?
Right. So that just might be, so balance counter is your result, right? And then counter is kind of like your running count, just so I know I'm on the same page. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
here, I'll do a letter counter.
Okay.
It's a little clearer.
So why don't you just run through what letter counter equals on the example we have on line 6, and then I think once you update, like maybe below it, put what it equals each time, and then I think that might lead you to a little bit cleaner.
Okay, let me I'll do some so start at the first R. So let's say R letter counter is 0. Or let's do so we'll do letter, just so I have like a notation, and then like letter counter, balance counter. That'll be my notation going forward. So we have R, and then so when we hit the R, it'll be 0, and this will also be 0. And then we hit the L, this will be 1, and this will be 0. So that's interesting. I see what you're saying.
Why don't you look at line 24 there, and then just think about when you want to update letter counter.
Right. So I want to update letter counter first, because like in this case, or so in the case of like the next week hit an R again. So then letter counter, well,
so if you're updating it first, then so say you had a check for letter counter first, then you checked if the count was 0, then you know you hit a balanced, right?
If I have a check for letter counter first?
Yeah, so I'll just do it just with this example here. So if we added 1 there, then subtracted 1, then we know that at this point we have 1 balanced, and then we're going to add 1, add another, and then we know that right there we got another 1.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So really we just do that. We can get rid of this Boolean, so we can say letter counter plus equals 1, and then Um, if that's 0, then theoretically we've hit a balanced string, I think. But
Yeah.
let me.
No, I think you got it there.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, your first solution was good. I mean, it definitely would have worked. I think it was
Right.
just a lot of, we got lost with the Boolean checks and everywhere,
Right.
but I mean,
Right. I
the
mean,
sort
I
of,
just wanted to get something out so I could kind of
yeah,
think of
absolutely.
refactoring it.
Yeah, no, I think this is really good. I think this end solution here is the best one I could think of at this time. So
Cool.
now your space is definitely going to be constant, right?
Right.
Because we only have a couple variables that we're using just to get there. But yeah, so the trick with this one was that when we're dealing with these strings, the kind of trap is that we resort to all these conditionals and like string builders and all this stuff.
Sure.
But and you got to that solution a lot faster than I expected, actually. So it let us actually, because usually I would have to cut it and be like, what if we just kept a running count? But I think with I gave you a little hint just to look at the example again, and that led you right to it. So I think that was really good.
Right.
But yeah, so again, this solution here I think is probably the cleanest that I could think of. It's kind of weird to think of like running through a string and not actually caring what's there and just having a counter to look at.
Right.
But
And I
kind of
think
update.
part of my like thought process in trying to have like all those conditionals was just like, I wanted to make sure that I didn't want to end up in a scenario where I like forgotten that you could end up with like the counter being 0, but like it wasn't, like if we had an unbalanced string in the middle there, I wasn't sure that it would end up working out. But I guess that if I were to step through one where you ended up where you had an unbalanced section in the middle, it probably still works out that at the right times you end up with zeros.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to
I think it is.
the Boolean was just to like make sure that I was like stepping through that correctly.
Yeah, and I think the first solution, like if you really kind of boiled it down, I think we were basically doing the exact same thing, just with like actually caring about what each letter was and like states and things like that. So
Right.
I mean, and honestly, I don't think you would have failed this interview. I think you probably would have passed because with the little hint, you would have been fine. So I think overall, good job.
Thank you.